Hi, I'm Louleigh and this is my podcast about my handmade life. You can find me on Instagram as InstamaticLouleigh and on Ravelry as Louleigh, and I'm a purveyor of fine knitting bags, and you can find me at louleigh.com. And if you go there, there are links to all of my online places, so it's an easy way to look everything up if you want to. Welcome, it's lovely to have you here and be chatting with you again. It's a beautiful day here and I have been sitting out in the garden knitting, and I thought I would come in and have a little chat with you and share some time and catch up on our knitting. There is a Louleigh Ravelry group and it's always wonderful if you pop over there and say hello. So the first thing to talk about is the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and I can't believe it's been 2 weeks already since the Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I had the most brilliant time. I had stayed with a friend in Durham and we took the train up on Friday and we stayed over. We found a nice flat on Airbnb and stayed at the bottom of the Royal Mile, and then came home on Saturday, and it was so brilliant to meet you. It was such a pleasure to see all of you, and that you would come and say hello and share your yarn haul. Well, not share it, but you know, you let me squish it a bit. Yeah, it was really nice to meet so many of you and make some in-person friends. I think the only problem was that there were so many people that I kind of just saw in passing, and actually I would have liked to sit down and have a cup of tea and a bit of cake and chat with you all. It would have been really nice, but I did get to sit down and have a cup of tea and a chat with some of you. So yeah, it was a really awesome event. I think the nice thing about the Edinburgh Yarn Festival is that, yeah, it has a really lovely marketplace, but they set aside a lot of time and space just for socialising and enjoying ourselves, and I really enjoy that aspect of it. You will have seen that I did come back with a bit of a haul. I think I'm set up for knitting goodies for the next few months at least. This is community news. So, Knit 1000 grams has come to an end. Well, if you want to carry on, that's fine, but all the prizes and things have come to an end. On the way up to the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, I drew for the last prize, which went to Mountain Pearl, and at the festival I picked up a lovely skein of Knitting Goddess Brit sock. Yeah, so it was nice to send something British out to the winner, and I hope you really enjoy that, Mountain Pearl. It was a wonderful knit along to have you all along with. I really enjoyed the chatter thread and seeing what people were knitting, and watching you having a crack at your stash and really enjoying some of your stash yarns. I think by the end of Knit 1000 grams I had made a little bit of a hole in my stash. However, I have since filled that hole. I think though what came out of it for me was that I'm happy at the level that my stash is at the moment and with the space that it's taking up in my house, but I don't actually want it to get any bigger. So I might have replaced all of the yarn which I had knitted, but my stash isn't growing. It was that, I think the thing that was bothering me was the fact that it just seemed to be getting bigger and bigger whether I knitted anything or not. So I'm kind of pleased that I'm now tracking what's coming in and what's going out, so that I can be more thoughtful about what I put into my stash and what I'm using and what I want to use. So for me that's been a really nice outcome, and I would love to hear in the chatter thread what effect that this has had on your stash accumulation. Have you rethought the way you manage your stash? Have you made it a bit prettier? Yeah, I would love to hear from you about any thoughts that you've had following that 1,000 grams, and if it's changed the way that you purchase yarn or something like that. That would be really interesting, actually. So as much as the thread for tracking what you've knitted is kind of closed, I'd love to hear from you in the chatter thread about your thoughts on accumulating stash now that you've knitted a kilo of it. The other piece of community news that I had to talk to you about was about the Stash Appreciation Society, and we have already had the first draw for February, which was kindly sponsored with Mars, who is Hey Brownberry on Instagram, and her podcast is Brownberry Chronicles. And she donated a pattern to the value of $8 to the February winner, and that was won by Mystery Sewer. So she has her pattern now, and it was really interesting. She picked a really interesting shawl. And so Mars has also agreed to donate another pattern for the March winner. And I thought I would just clarify how I'm doing this drawing over the course of the year. So there's only one thread for finished objects for the whole of the year. However, at the end of each month, I'll just take the finished objects for the March period and draw from those. So I think I'll be drawing from something like number 23 through to number whatever, so that only objects finished in March will be eligible for the March prize. I thought I'd better make that explicit in case someone thinks I'm trying to do the dodge or something. But the other thing that we have going on in the Stash Appreciation Society is the Spring Challenge. And the challenge is to use 3 yarns from your stash to knit something. And I haven't cast on my something yet, but I have it needle adjacent. I have it in my bag here. And I've decided to knit the Mix-a-Lot socks from Rachel Coopy, which are these really fun little socks with a lace pattern added in just to make it a bit more exciting. And I had leftovers from my exploration station. I think I have a neutral in here as well, but I have these leftovers from my exploration station, and so I'm going to knit those for the spring challenge. So basically you have to use 3 different yarns from your stash. There's no specification of how much of those yarns you have to use, but you just have to use them in one project. And I think that's running till the end of May. So I would be really interested to see what pattern ideas you have and what you're planning to make if you're thinking about joining in the spring challenge. And I hope you will. I bet there's some lovely things in your stash, and there's some wonderful patterns that incorporate a few different yarns and that sort of thing, so it's dead fun. So yeah, that's what I'm doing for the Stash Appreciation Society at the moment. So I have had a little bit of a podcaster hiccup because my battery ran out, and so I've had lunch and walked the dogs, and I'm back. Today I think I'm wearing pretty much the same as last time. So I have on my neon cardigan by Hohi Locatelli and my succulent shawl by Maria Monska, and I'll put details of those in the show notes if you're interested. The last time I spoke to you, I had been talking about the Louleigh yarn, the new Louleigh yarn from the Fibre Company. It's a wool, cotton, silk and linen blend, and I had made a swatch and was going to test drive it a little bit. Now Louleigh comes in 50-gram hanks, and retails, I think it's for about £9.50. So I would probably put it in a slightly more expensive yarn category. But last time we spoke, I was flipping a swatch in front of you, and I had been busily road testing that swatch. And if you want to read about the details of my little test, they're all over on my blog at louleigh.com. But basically, I made my swatch and I washed it and rechecked the gauge. And I think it had changed its dimensions a little bit. The row gauge had shortened and the stitch gauge had gotten bigger. So that's basically what happened on washing. I don't think it was a superwash yarn. No. And then I decided to hang it, because often yarns with a cotton content, or even clothing with a cotton content, can grow. So I basically took the swatch and I hung it from a coat hanger with just a little bit of weight on the bottom, just to see if it would change shape. And I left it that way overnight. It was dry. I left it overnight that way, and it didn't change gauge at all. So I think the silk and the linen content of that yarn really would give a garment a lot of structure. They've all obviously really, the fibre company have obviously really thought about adding a bit of strength so it will keep its shape. And then the last test that I did was the armpit test. So basically I fold the swatch over the armpit of my bra and wear it like that. And there's two reasons for that. The first is so that you can see if it's scratchy, and I can report that for all 3 days that I wore the swatch, I completely forgot it was there. So I'd sort of take off my clothes at night and it's like, oh, what's this? And the other thing is, I also did that test to see how it would wear. Yeah, and it did over the 3 days. Of course, in your armpit you get a lot of friction and a little bit of moisture there. And it did start to sort of look a bit flat, but there was one pill. It hadn't sort of fuzzed up a lot or anything like that. And so I thought that was pretty good, really. And the other thing was that it did come out with kind of a flat cottony sort of look that garments can get when they start to wear. But I re-washed the swatch and it did sort of revive it and come back to life and restore it to its original form. And as I said, there was only one pill after all that time. So it's not a yarn that's going to pill like craziness. Now, you're probably thinking, Lee, where is the swatch? And I had been chatting online with a knitting chum of mine about yarns that we were thinking about knitting with this summer. And I said, oh, I have in my possession a really interesting yarn that you might be interested in. We had been eyeballing patterns and all this sort of thing. So I posted it off to my friend so that she could have a scrunch and a feel. But I should have been able to insert the photographs here so you'll get an idea of what the swatch looked like as I did each test. I guess the only yarn that I've sort of come across that might be comparable to Louleigh is the Rowan wool cotton, and I have knitted with that. I've made children's garments with it. And in my experience, it's not an incredibly pilly yarn. It's quite heavy and it does wear well, and it knits at about the same gauge. I think it's about a DK as well. But I think between the two, I definitely preferred the Louleigh. I think it had a nicer drape. and it just felt a little bit more lightweight. It would be interesting to have the two side by side, but obviously I can't do that now, because the other thing is that I have drawn for the Louleigh giveaway that we had in the Ravelry thread, and I have sent that yarn off now to, is it Astrid? Yes, I think it's Astrid. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, but hopefully you have that yarn by now and are enjoying it. So as I said, I think Louleigh would sit for me in kind of the pricey category, but it would still be one that I would save up and knit with, because I think the finished garment would be really nice and long lasting. So the long of and the short of it is, I think that yarn gets a thumbs up from me. This is the spinning segment, and this is what I have been spinning. Now, in February last year, when I was in New Zealand, let me make sure that's focusing, I went to visit an old, well, she's not old, she's the same age as me. I went to visit a school friend of mine, and we have both in the interim independently started spinning, and I happened to ask her what her favourite spinning fibre was, because we were both sitting there proclaiming that merino was not our favourite thing to spin. And of course the variety, the sort of like the common breeds that she can get over there are a little different from the ones that I can get here. And so she said that one of her favourite fibres to spin was actually Perendale. And so when I got home, I got some top from Wing and Woolworks and decided to first dye it and then spin it up. And Perendale is quite an interesting breed for me, because in the area where I grew up, most farmers either had Romney sheep, which is what we had on our farm, or Perendales. And so it's a sheep that I'm kind of familiar with. And so I was quite interested to try spinning this. Now, a Perendale is a cross between a Romney and a Cheviot. And it was a breed that was actually developed in the 1950s at the same university where I got my degree. It had been an agricultural college before it turned into a university. So yeah, so they did a lot of sort of development around different breeds of sheep and all sorts of other agricultural things. So I was quite excited to spin this up. I haven't spun a lot of Romney to be able to compare it with that. I think Romney is a long wool, and I think it's one of the finer long wools, whereas this Perendale with the Cheviot in it seems to have a bit more loft to it and be a bit more spongy and springy to the Romney that I have spun. But yeah, so I did this as a 2-ply on my Major Craft little gem. I think I've said before that I've been trying to spin my yarns just a little bit more loosely, so that they're not quite, so that they're a little bit loftier and more lightweight. And of course this is the bit where I sniff it and go so yeah, I'm really looking forward to putting that into a cake and getting it onto my needles. I think it will be a really interesting one to knit up. I think it's going to knit up as somewhere between a DK and an Aran, sort of maybe more worsted Aran. So yeah, that will be really interesting, and it'll be also interesting to try the scratch test with this against my neck as well. I I think I have just under 100 grams there, so I did do some consultation on Instagram as to what I should knit with that once I get going with it. I have also had another go at sewing undies, and when I say that, I hope you're not picturing sort of like lacy underdecks or anything like that, because I am a full cotton briefs knickers sort of a person, and so this is what I've been doing. The pattern is from the Make Bra website, and I chose it because it looks a lot like some pant that I already have. Yeah, so it was a paid for pattern from Make Bra, and it was reasonably straightforward. However, the pattern doesn't come with a lot of directions or tips or details or anything else. So if this is your first time sewing stretch fabrics, then I probably wouldn't recommend that you start here. I mean, knickers is a good place to start because it's not a huge project and it won't take a lot of time, but you might need to supplement this pattern with some other information. The other thing was that these have quite there's not a lot of seam allowance on them, but what I noticed is that around the gusset they haven't sort of contoured the pattern pieces to allow for the seam allowance. So whilst the pattern pieces meet up right at the edge, they don't meet up where the seams do 6mm in. So I ended up with a jolt on these gusset seams that I had to trim away, which actually made the gusset quite a bit narrower. The other thing that I failed to read in the pattern was that it's actually designed to be used with fold over elastic. So if you use this other sort of elastic that you just sort of tuck in, then you need to add some more seam allowance. So I lost a bit of knicker that way. I don't think I would. I think for the next pair, I'm thinking of these as a prototype, because as you can see from the legs and whatnot, they have gone a bit wonky, a bit fluted round there. They're not sitting really straight and nice. So I think I could I could have another crack at these, and I think I would use fold over elastic, because with this sort of, is it a P-code edge or whatever, you sort of sew it on and then you fold it back and sew it again, and I really don't like how that looks on the inside. Yeah, I don't like how that looks there where you double seam it. So I think what I'm going to do before I sew the next pair is actually get some more information about sewing knits successfully. And also I've got some fold over elastic to try out. This fabric is 100% cotton, and most knicker patterns say that you should use a cotton spandex because of course it's going to be more elastic. But what intrigued me about this is that once these were worn out, I could chop off the elastic and actually just put this on my compost heap. Whereas a spandex is not going to biodegrade. So I thought it would be quite fun to just see how a pair of 100% cotton undies worked out. Yeah, so I have some more of this fabric and I have another fabric as well, and as I say, I've got the fold over elastic to try this pattern again. And just see how I get on. It fits as well as my other pants. So yeah, as I say, this is the prototype, phase 1. So onwards and upwards. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will have noticed that I have been getting really excited about this book recently, Kofta Bookin'. And I had been looking through the patterns from this book on Ravelry. Well, I've been looking at the pattern pictures on Ravelry, and was really inspired by all of the different colourwork patterns. This is a book from Norway, and it's in Norwegian, and I don't speak Norwegian. But I wanted to get this book because I have actually knitted from Norwegian patterns before, and I have used a translation guide that's on a website called Spelling Tuesday, which I'll link to in the show notes, to help me sort of pick out words and to make out the instructions. However, since then, Google Translate has come along in leaps and bounds, and I have found it really good for being able to translate the patterns and also some of the other information in this book. The other thing is I also have Norwegian family members as a backup if I do get stuck with this, and a couple of you on Instagram have also said that you would be able to help. So anyway, I decided to knit this lovely jumper on the cover here. This is the first one I want to knit as I work my way through this book. I may not work my way through this book, but you know, you can dream. Yeah, so I decided to knit this one on the front, and I'm going to try and pronounce the name of it, which is Boverton. That's probably not how you say it at all. And yeah, if you can help me with the pronunciation, and then I would be really grateful. But yes, so I have started knitting on that actually, and I got some yarn. I sent off for the yarn and decided to use Jamieson and Smith in colour FC38 and colour 202, but I really liked that ginger colour. It's got so many other elements in it. They've blended together orange and brown, and there's little bits of green, and just the depth of colour is just wonderful, and I think that's one of the things I enjoy about the Shetland yarns. The other thing that inspired me to use this yarn is that I used this, did I use this or Jamieson's, to knit my Crofthouse hat, and I love the fabric. It's so incredibly fine and lightweight, and yet still really insulative and warm, and I really enjoy wearing it. And I guess the other thing is that Jamieson and Smith and Jamieson's can come in such an infinite colour palette that you can really go a bit wild with it. And so I just looked through until I have a shade card for Jamieson and Smith. I just looked through that until I found something that really made my heart sing, and then I sent off for it. And this came from Brit Yarn really quickly, so that was awesome. So I have actually started my my cardigan. I have it here. However, I didn't do a gauge swatch. I used my Crofthouse hat as a kind of a gauge swatch, and then I just went forth boldly with what I thought would be the right needle. And I don't recommend that course of action to anybody unless you're completely cool with having to rip what you've done out completely and start again. And that's what's going to happen here, because I've realised that Well, firstly, I don't actually like the fabric that I've been knitting, and actually I need to knit it a little bit tighter. So when I've signed off from you, I am going to start a new neckband. And I was really excited about getting the contrast colour into that, but clearly that's not going to happen for another day or so. Well, if I crack on after I do this, then I might get onto the colour work. Yeah, so I don't recommend not doing a gauge swatch at all unless you're completely cool with starting from scratch again. Completely cool. So yeah, I've been really excited about that. And as I say, basically what I've been doing to translate the Norwegian patterns is just using the words from Spelling Tuesday, and then I just go through and pick out everything that I can make a direct sort of exchange with. And then anything that's a little bit weird I've just been putting into, well, not weird, but of anything that I can't decipher, I've just been putting into Google Translate. And as I say, since I last tried using Google Translate for translating knitting patterns, it's come along in leaps and bounds. It seems to know quite a bit of knitting terminology now. And I've actually been making my notes directly into the book, because when and if this ever departs from my possession and goes to live with someone else, that person is liable to be an English speaker. And so I thought I might as well just in pencil make my notes directly into the book, so that, I don't know, they might be a bit more inspired if they can see the English notes and see that it's possible. I would say that if you're actually used to a yoked garment construction, or if you've done a traditional Norwegian jersey Norwegian sweater where you steek in the neckband and sleeves, then you can probably have a good crack at this without needing to speak Norwegian at all. Yeah. So that's what I've been excited about at the moment, is getting started with that. And the other thing is that I have been sewing as well. So I have all of this in my new project bag. And it has a fox on this side. And then the hunter on this side. And this was a tea towel that I picked up from the art gallery in York, and it's a print by an artist called Angela Harding, and I thought it was really pretty. It was quite a large tea towel, so I cut the print in half and turned it into a project bag. I'm not particularly pleased with these ends, they're a little bit rough. So I'm actually thinking that I might unpick them and take them off and put leather ends on there. I have some scraps of leather, and I think that would just make it a bit nicer. However, I have already been using this outside and had it set on the wall, so it might need to go in the washing machine before then. So the last thing I have to talk to you about today is a Filament magazine, which I was sent by Kathleen and Anne, who are the designers behind the magazine, to review, and they have also offered a copy that I can give away to you. So Filament is a fairly new magazine. I think they're on to their second issue now. Yeah, and they sent me an e-copy to have a look through, and yeah, and let you know what I thought of it. I think it retails for around $28 US, and there's 9 patterns in it. And I have to say, on first glance, it's very pink and fluffy, which is not my style at all. But I had a look through, and I quite liked the selection of patterns that they had. They've got garments and accessories in the magazine, and there are a couple of things that I thought would be really interesting to knit. So I particularly not liked a pair of socks they had in there, and I also liked there was a cowl and mitt set that were quite pretty. I would say that I think the one thing I think they could do better is that some of the things were only photographed from one angle, and so you didn't necessarily get to see all of the details. So I think in future issues I'd like them to, it'd be nice if they improved the photography a bit and maybe make the layout feel a little bit less cramped. But I thought there was some really interesting things in there. There was a nice shawl and a couple of jumpers as well. So if you want to win a copy of Filament magazine, I'm going to start a thread in my in the Ravelry group, and you can pop over there and just have a look at the spring issue. I'll link to that in the group, and just say what pattern you'd like to knit from the magazine. Have a wee look and see what you like, and I will draw that on the 1st of April. So that's all from me today. It's been so nice to sit and have a chat to you about my knitting and catch up again, and it would be lovely to see you over in the Ravelry group, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Bye!